Okay, good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. There's a few more seats. If people are standing, there's plenty of room to sit. So welcome. We're so pleased you could join us today. Our thanks to the City of Foster City for hosting us. This is a great forum for a conference of this kind. So as many of you know, Congresswoman Spear, Assemblyman Gordon, and I held our first Sea Level Rise Summit in December of 2013 at the College of San Mateo. And we're really fortunate that Congressman Spear can join us today. Congressman Spear is a national leader on the issue of sea level rise, has championed the cause of bay restoration, and like so many other issues that we face, she always inspires us to take local action and lead by example. Assemblymember Gordon cannot join us. He's in Sacramento, but his district director, Jeremy Dennis, is with us. Assemblymember Gordon chaired the Assembly Select Committee on Sea Level Rise and also has done some really important work to procure funding for climate adaptation. So sea level rise is one of the most serious consequences we face from climate change, and as we know, it will have a very significant effect on San Mateo County. As we've emphasized in past forums, we are in the unique position in that we have more people and property value at risk from the rising sea than any other county in the state. And visibility about this issue is continuing to grow. In fact, just yesterday, the San Mateo County Civil Grand Jury released a report entitled Flooding Ahead, Planning for Sea Level Rise. So today we're excited to launch a comprehensive sea level rise assessment, vulnerability assessment for the entire San Mateo County Bayshore and for the coastline from Half Moon Bay north. This study is funded by a generous grant from the California State Coastal Conservancy in the amount of $500,000. In addition, the Army Corps of Engineers has agreed to contribute $100,000 in staff time to help us with the project. This study will help us establish a baseline inventory of the assets at risk from sea level rise. It will also help us identify assets that are at risk from current flooding conditions, which are significant in our county. In this time of drought, it's hard to remember that, but we may see an El Nino next year, and we'll have a very different perspective. And flooding risks will only grow with climate change and more extreme weather conditions. So our hope is that the study will provide us with a foundation on which to develop specific adaptation strategies and help us focus on our most vulnerable assets. So let me just briefly go over the agenda. We'll begin with some opening remarks and perspectives from Congresswoman Spear. And we'll also hear from two other new members of our team, Supervisor Don Horsley and Nadine Peterson, the Deputy Executive Officer of the California State Coastal Conservancy. Supervisor Horsley's district includes almost all of the San Mateo County coastline, and Supervisor Horsley certainly knows the coast extremely well. I'm also pleased my colleague Supervisor Groom is here, who serves on the Coastal Commission, who also brings expertise in that area. And the Coastal Commission, as many of you may know, just released an important sea level rise guidance policy. So we're happy to have her as well. Nadine Peterson leads the Coastal Conservancy's sea level rise planning efforts. We are absolutely thrilled to be partnering with the Coastal Conservancy on this project, and we're happy Nadine can be with us as well. So following these remarks, we'll review what we've done to date here in the county, and particularly introduce the members of our team that are working on this project and future projects. And we also will briefly review 4 projects that are underway in the county that are addressing sea level rise. After that, we'll hear a presentation from Peter Wiseman of Arcadis, who's going to explain in detail the vulnerability assessment process and what we hope to accomplish. Arcadis is a global design, engineering, and management consulting firm, and we've retained them to assist with the study. And then the meeting will end with a map exercise that will help us to identify some assets and a discussion of where we will need your assistance as we go forward. So with that, I'd like to yield the microphone to our friend, Congresswoman Jackie Spear. And then we'll hear from Supervisor Horsley and Nadine Peterson. Thank you, Jackie.
Good morning, everyone. You know, everything is conceived in terms of one's perspective. I've just spent the entire week in a rainy, drizzly, depressing place, Washington, D.C. And I come home last night and see the sun shining this morning, and while we don't have the rain that we desperately need, we do have some incredible sunshine, and we do live in one of the most phenomenal places on the planet. And that's why we're all here, because, in fact, we have a lot at risk. Now, I want to first say to Dave Pine, to Carol Groom and Don Horsley, you've got 3 members of the Board of Supervisors here. That's how important this issue is to the future of this county. Next to the drought, there's no issue that is more important to us right now as elected officials in San Mateo County than to deal with this issue. It is that critical. We cannot push it off to another generation. We have got to deal with it now. So over the last 2 years, a lot of work has been done out of some great leadership by Dave Pine and Rich Gordon, funding coming from the state so that we could address this issue. I'm going to try and give you a perspective of how important this is. We are 20 cities in this county. And because we are 20 cities in this county with 20 different forms of leadership, well, same form of leadership, 20 different councils providing leadership, we are at a disadvantage. Now, I'm not making this as any kind of threatening suggestion that we become a city and county. Don't get nervous here. But we've got to start acting like a city and county in terms of accessing federal funds. So we're going to have to start acting regionally if we want to get our fair share of federal dollars. As you know, I represent most of San Mateo County and part of the city and county of San Francisco. And I look at funding formulas, and I look at how much the city and county of San Francisco gets, and then I combine all the money that San Mateo County gets through local jurisdictions, and it's always maybe a third to a half less. So, if we really want to address this issue, we're going to have to address it regionally. And we're going to have to address it as a group. So I hope that we can all come together and do just that. Now, every once in a while, there are waves of funding that come from the federal government. But if you've looked at the Congress recently, that ain't going to happen anytime soon. But when we did have stimulus money that wasn't supported, I might add, by most of the folks that are in power now in Congress, when we did get stimulus money, communities like Millbrae were able to shave $1 million off of the cost of their loan over 20 or 30 years. There's a project underway in the South County that's gotten federal funds. But let me tell you what's going on in the city and county of San Francisco. They're coming together and looking at a design project to deal with the sea level rise issue along their coastline around Slope Boulevard and Ocean Avenue. So we're competing with that. And we've got to start thinking much more shrewdly about how we're going to access federal funds. So I hope that as you design today, that you'll recognize the importance of coming together. We cannot think individually in this county if we're going to address this issue. We have got to think as one unit and act as one unit. And the efforts by Dave and Don and Carol and Rich to bring us all together to do that is so very important. Now, I visit many companies throughout our region. Every week I visit at least one company. And there's extraordinary things going on at those companies. And they recognize that they're sitting in the middle of a big puddle and that we've got to address it. And they're willing to be part of that solution. But we've got to develop the evidence. And that's why having this study, looking at the vulnerabilities, is going to be key to that. If we come together and we provide the evidence, both local businesses and the federal authorities, whether it's the FEMA or the other groups that play an important part in this regard, the Army Corps of Engineers and so many others. If we start acting like one unit, they're going to like that a lot. And they'll probably look more kindly on our efforts as well. So I'm not going to be able to stay for most of this. I've got many things I've got to do today since I'm only home in the district one day a week. But I want to tell you a little bit about what I'm going to be able to go do around 10:30 this morning. I'm going to go visit a World War II veteran at Peninsula Hospital. He slipped and fell and had hip surgery and isn't doing really well. But I'm going to visit him because he realized that he never got all his war medals. And he wasn't all that concerned about his war medals, except as he was growing older, he realized, well, maybe his grandchildren would want to know of what their grandfather had done. So we're going to Peninsula to provide him with those medals he so justly earned in World War II. A generation that we call the greatest generation, a generation that gave us the opportunity to have a life that was better than theirs. And our millennial kids and those that come after are really asking the question, are those of us in leadership today truly going to leave this planet better off than it was for us? Are their lives going to be better off than ours? And with the cost of housing and the drought and sea level rise, we've got a lot of work to do. So let's find a way to come together, recognizing we're not going to all get everything that we want for our cities, but for a county as a whole, we need to recognize that this is a big issue. There really is no bigger issue for us to address, with the exception of the drought right now, and housing and homelessness. But this is really important. And I'm proud to see so many of you here recognizing that it's worth spending 4 or 5 hours today to address it. We're a great county, and we do great things. The big lift that Carol Groom has been spearheading on a county level, getting all of these kids at grade level in 3rd grade in reading, when 50% or almost 50% of the kids can't read at grade level in 3rd grade. So we can do it, and we will do it. Thank you all for being here.
Well, thanks, Jackie, and thanks for talking about us having to work together. But, we do have district elections now, and I do have the co-site, and I'm really happy to see all my co-siters here. We are a real active group, and we really are concerned about what's happening over our co-site. So, I do want to really welcome everybody here. I'm really glad to be part of this process as well. That our coast is so vital to our whole community. It doesn't have the kind of economic impact that maybe the 101 corridor or the Bayside has, but it is the recreational dream of all of us, both in the Bay Area, this whole 7 million people. And sometimes on weekends, coast-siders can tell you, sometimes we feel like all 7 million are over on the coast side. So in any case, I do want to welcome all of you to this sea level rise vulnerability assessment project. It's a very important project, really proud to be part of it, proud to work with Dave and select our new coastside resilience, or climate resilience specialist as well. We actually stole her from another agency that's here today. I stole Deborah Hurst from another agency, and she's been a great asset to my office as well. I do want to say that we are already seeing the kinds of king tides and storms and coastal erosion, what they're going to be doing to our natural environment. All you have to do is look at Pacifica and Land's End. We're losing buildings, losing houses, losing land. And even at Surfers Beach, in fact, Surfers Beach is an area, for those of you who don't know where it's at, it's kind of on the south part of the coast side. It's a great place for surfing, great place for visitors, great place for the beach, but it's being eroded away. And when we were doing this project, we finally realized that the Highway 1 is actually a berm that actually prevents flooding in all of El Granada. So we're already seeing the effects of sea level rise as well as king tides. So on the Bayside, we're seeing flooding in vulnerable areas like Belmont Creek and San Carlos, and again, that's my district, so I have parts of, I hate to be parochial, but and we all are concerned about our district, and especially that particular area that floods, because it floods into a trailer park that's really low-income folks, and we really are responsible in making sure that their quality of life is really improved. We cannot allow that to happen again. So we have to assess, we have to plan now. These are vulnerable areas, and they can be increasingly impacted by the rise of seas and other consequences of climate change across our cities and across the county as well. And of course, our coast side and the Bayside are interdependent in terms of our economy, our natural resources, our infrastructure, and really our quality of life as well. So we have to assess our vulnerabilities and then move forward to create solutions appropriate for diverse areas on our shores. And we need to create a vision for resilient shorelines, and we need to work together to fund projects to prepare for rising seas. And we've already had some positive examples and new ideas for adaptation and resilience. In Princeton, and again, that's really one of my big projects on my district. We're looking to protect the Princeton Marsh. There's a marsh, and there are parts of it that are actually in private ownership, and we're working with organizations like Post to actually purchase some of those private lands to really restore the marshland. We believe that that's also going to be offering flood protection for that really very special area. And we're exploring the idea of beneficial reuse of sand dredge from Pillar Point Harbor for beach nourishment along Highway 1 in Princeton and Surfers Beach. And sort of an interesting thing, the more sand that you can stick on Surfers Beach, for example, it actually protects the highway and it improves surfing. So if any of you are surfers, it's really a great project for you. In fact, all the surf riders are really excited about that project, and we're going to work collaboratively with the Harbor District. Lindemar Beach is an example of successful managed retreat and improved public access as well as coastal trails. And I think you're also going to see a picture of what's happened with flooding in Lindemar Beach, and actually floods into Lindemar Boulevard, into homes in Pacifica. So we can build multi-purpose flood and habitat improvement projects to address current flooding and long-term sea level rise. So in closing, I'd really like to thank the Coastal Conservancy for investing in San Mateo County, for giving me Deborah Hurst, and a thank you for the work that we are working on together, and we begin this vulnerability assessment project.
Good morning. I'm Nadine Peterson with the Coastal Conservancy, and I just want to say it is so exciting to see so many of you here today. We think the most successful and challenging projects are so much more likely to succeed, and one of the foundations is that having huge community interest. And so thank you very much. We're very excited to be here as you initiate this project. For those of you who don't know, the Coastal Conservancy is a non-regulatory coastal management agency. We have a broad mandate both to protect and restore natural resources, urban waterfronts, agricultural lands, and to provide and protect public access. We work closely with many agencies and work with many of you, BCDC, the Coastal Commission, and non-regulatory agencies and local governments as well. We fund planning and implementation of generally multi-benefit projects, including the managed retreat at the Lindemar Beach that you're all familiar with. That goes way back. Our statute was recently expanded to give specific authority to help communities address climate change impacts and to reduce greenhouse gases. So thanks to the leadership then of Rich Gordon, we now have what's called a coastal resiliency account in our budget, which when funds are appropriated, provides money to help communities like you, and it also provides some to the Commission and BCDC. We hope there'll be additional appropriations. We have had one that came to us for $2.5 million so far. In total, we've already funded over 20 sea level rise related projects along the coast and in the bay. Most of those are at the assessment stage, but not all. Each one's different. Some are much more complex. Some are really targeted to a particular study that will help inform the assessment, and some are, already moving into looking at alternative adaptation measures. Our interest is in helping you understand as a community what the impacts will be by providing our staff support and technical support through funding, and to help you evaluate eventually the trade-offs and potential responses, and ultimately to help you fund implementation of the most cost-effective, multi-benefit actions that will protect the community assets and hopefully natural resources to the extent possible. With the leadership you have here and the fantastic participation of local governments, leadership of Congresswoman Spear and Supervisors Dave Pine and Don Horsley, you have an excellent chance of success. And I will close my comments by saying that the Conservancy was very involved in helping to shape the Napa Flood Protection Project, which started out as a core channelization project, ultimately became a multi-benefit successful project that we see today. And one of the key elements in that was this incredible support from all agencies and incredible stakeholder involvement. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all continue and make a contribution to this effort. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks, Congressman Spear and Supervisor Horsley and Nadine Peterson. Before we get into the meat of today's discussion, which is our study going forward, we wanted to take some time just to first introduce the members of our team who have been and will be working on sea level rise projects, and talk about 4 projects that are actually underway in the county that are addressing sea level rise. There's plenty of work that's already underway, and I just want to quickly update everyone on that. First off, I want to acknowledge that we've created an Office of Sustainability in the county. This is a new initiative. It's about a year old now, and this office will handle a broad array of sustainability issues, including such things as our new Community Choice Energy Initiative, promoting alternative forms of transportation, working on stormwater issues. But they've also have adopted the sea level rise efforts as part of their mission. So let me quickly introduce, or they can just wave, Jim Eggermeyer, who's the director of the office. We also have with us, I believe, Gordon Tong and Stephen Stolte. And we are here to also welcome Hillary Papendick, who just started this week and previously was with the Coastal Commission, and she will be our primary person working on this study. And as was mentioned, she was from the Coastal Commission and has great expertise. And her position is partly funded through the Coastal Conservancy, and again, we're so grateful to them. From the supervisor's office, Michael Barber from my team and Deborah Hurst from Don Horsley's team are committing substantial amounts of their efforts towards this project. And also, I want to acknowledge Craig Connor, our partner at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The Army Corps is going to play a big role in sea level rise in the years ahead. So we're happy to begin to work with the Corps. I also would like to take a moment to recognize Brian Perkins, the Congressman Spear's district director. Congressman Spear asked Brian to work with me to start to think through the very issue she highlighted in her remarks, which is, how are 20 cities in the county going to organize themselves to work on this big challenge? And this question, too, is really at the heart of the San Mateo County Civil Grand Jury Report, which we'll distribute a number of links to you after this conference. But they basically strongly recommend that a single county-wide organization should undertake sea level rise planning. So today, Brian and I have had extensive conversations about this with a number of county managers, city council members, and with CCAG. Currently, there is actually in existence today a flood control district, a county flood control district. But it has only very limited revenue through some pre-Prop 13 tax sources that we can only collect in a couple of subzones. In the near term, we may use that district just to get things started, do some planning work, and make sure we keep our momentum going. But in the longer term, we need to raise countywide revenue, and we need to build capacity to protect us from these big storm events and from this sea level rise. So Brian and I have been looking closely at a potential joint powers authority, and we intend to continue to explore that and other structures with city leaders. And I think this grand jury report will help bring momentum to that. And it's a difficult thing to bring 21 jurisdictions together, but as the Congresswoman emphasized, we have to do that to make progress. So let me now quickly introduce 4 people who will speak for a few minutes about things they're doing on the ground today. We have with us John Beerer, who's the principal engineer at SFO, and he'll speak for a couple minutes about how SFO is looking at sea level rise. Len Matterman, the executive director of the San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority, will speak briefly on the Safer Bay project. Dilip Trivedi, who's the vice president of Moffett and Nichols. We're just completing a project looking at the San Bruno Creek and Colma Creek and how they, where they intersect into the bay and how sea level rise will impact them. And finally, Jill Eckes, who is a senior management analyst at Half Moon Bay, and they are looking at their local coastal plan with sea level rise in mind. So if we can each of these speakers we'll just give some brief remarks. So we'll start with, can we start with Joe Beer? Or I'm not sure how the slides are organized.
I think. Yes. No, just go to the slideshow. There we go. Good. Thank you, Dave. As Dave said, my name is Joe Beer. I'm the Director of Engineering and Construction Services at SFO. I'm just going to talk to you very briefly about what we did and give you an overview of where we are. So SFO, being on the bay, has always had some form of seawall protection, and over the last 30 years we've reconstructed all of our seawalls, and this just gives you an idea of the seawalls we have in place and the segments and where those segments of seawalls are. What really got us interested or prompted action from us on sea level rise is this slide, and there's other slides out there that show inundation to SFO that some of you may have seen. In 2010, the city of San Francisco joined FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program, and because of that and for other reasons, FEMA remapped the flood risk to the bay, and in 2013 came out with their draft flood insurance rate map, which set a base flood elevation of 10.5 feet. And there's a few important things to note about this map. One is it's based on a 100-year flood. The second is it's based on elevation, so it's not taking into account the seawalls we have in place or the drainage systems we have at the airport. And the third thing is very important. It's not taking into account sea level rise. So with this map, we knew that we had to take some action. And in late 2013, we went out with a contract and hired Moffett and Nichols to perform our airport shoreline protection feasibility study. In that study, they performed a bay water modeling for both sea level rise and extreme storm events for the airport-specific bay coastal section. They also looked at the integrity of our seawalls based on FEMA standards. The airport has almost 8 miles of bayfront perimeter, and they looked at the deficiencies in the heights of our seawalls when taking into account flooding and sea level rise. They also looked at the structural stability, basically, of our seawalls, the integrity of our seawalls. A very important part of our flood protection is our interior drainage system, and they looked at that. And then they provided recommendations to the airport to move forward that we may implement, and we're looking at those right now. And I'll go through the next 2 slides very quickly. These 2 slides will show the deficiencies of our seawall when taking into account sea level rise and extreme storm events. And you can't see it too well, but the yellow along the perimeter shows slight deficiencies, and the red shows greater deficiencies. And this is looking at a projected sea level rise of 16 inches in 2050. And then if you jump forward to 2100, you can see our entire perimeter is red, and we're completely deficient. So we understand that we have vulnerabilities, and we need to implement protections. So what are we doing? With the information that we got from our study, we're starting to put together, we're starting to go through the CEQA process, the California permitting process. We're putting that information together. We've also been in discussion with the Army Corps of Engineers for about a year and a half, and we recently sent a conditional letter of intent to them to partner in looking at flood protections for the airport. So that's ongoing. We've submitted an A99 application to FEMA, and what that will do if we get that certification is basically give us a grace period to plan and implement seawall or flooding protections, but also be in compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program. And then finally, we're trying to monitor the legislation and executive orders that are coming out of both the state and the federal government, and making sure that whatever we do is in compliance with those requirements. So that's a very brief overview of what we're doing. Actually, there's one more slide, but I'm going to skip that. No, it's not even showing. Oh, I went back. Okay, let me just. So that's what SFO is doing. And I've been asked not to take questions now, but if you do have questions, I will be available at the break in the lobby. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave, and everyone else who's putting together this project. The San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority is about 15 years old. It was formed after a major flood in 1998. And we've generally been working on San Francisco Creek, which is the county line between San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. But we, in a couple of years ago, the board decided to get into the business of sea level rise, and some of these slides will explain why. So we have a project called Safer Bay. It's an acronym for Strategy to Advance Flood Protections, Ecosystem, and Recreation. There's a lot of vulnerability in our area. The top image shows East Palo Alto earlier this year in one of the marshes adjacent to the homes. Some of these homes, well, all of these homes at base floor level are below sea level, and in some cases their roofs are below the so-called levees that are adjacent to the bay. And these levees are not certified levees, and so one of parts of our project is to develop certified levees. We also have major infrastructure that's at risk, the PG&E substation by Ravenswood Pond. The almanac shows a good picture of water adjacent to Highway 84 and the Dumbarton Bridge. So we know we have these vulnerabilities. We also know that there are costs, not just associated with future risk, but associated with present insurance requirements. And this image shows the FEMA floodplain map, which is changing. And the areas in red show the changes that will occur or are expected to occur in the next iteration of floodplain maps that are going to come out soon. The last iteration of floodplain maps came out in October 2012. And so I think in the future, we'll see new maps with greater frequency. And as you know, if you hold a mortgage, you're required to have flood insurance in these areas. So this image shows the extent of where the JPA is working, and that's from the Mountain View Palo Alto border on the bottom right up to the Redwood City Menlo Park border. The areas that are shaded in color are in the 100-year floodplain. And as you can see, it's several thousand properties in the creek floodplain, which is blue, in the bay floodplain, which is green, and the areas in red are overlapped. So this is the area we're working in, and we have a series of projects to address this. The first project is actually starting today, and if you drive down Highway 101 and you cross San Francisco Creek, you'll be over a bridge, and that bridge is being retrofitted by Caltrans, in part to deal with traffic flow on top of the bridge, but also in large part to deal with creek flow under the bridge, and because that bridge is the bridge of least capacity in the whole system. And the rest of the projects, we have a project along the bay which incorporate 26 inches of sea level rise, and that project will turn the red area green, meaning it will take the floodplain out of that area in East Palo Alto out of the creek floodplain. But it will still be in the bay floodplain. Further projects upstream will get rid of the creek 100-year floodplain. So we'll be left with this area of green, which is the bay floodplain with sea level rise. The SAFER project is intended to address the 3 feet of sea level rise. That's our design criteria. And so again, we have this 9-mile boundary from the Mountain View border to the Redwood City border. It's actually the largest shoreline project in California right now to deal with sea level rise. And it's very complicated because it involves both counties and it involves several cities. Our goal is not just to get people out of the FEMA floodplain, as I said, to go to 3 feet of sea level rise. The funders of this project right now to get us through design and the EIR include the California Department of Water Resources, the State Coastal Conservancy through a Climate Ready grant. Thank you again. Also, Facebook is a private funder of this project, and it's great to see Lauren here from Facebook. Facebook has Vulnerability, which I'll show in a second, at its headquarters location, and they're a very welcome partner to this process. Also, the 3 cities that are involved and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as a federal partner, and which is great news that the federal government is also participating. So in 2015, here we sit. In the San Mateo County side of this project, we have 9 reaches and 16 alternatives. And we're trying to winnow this down to essentially 9 reaches and a preferred alternative. And so to go from 16 to 9. And what this shows is the area from San Francisco Creek on the right to the Redwood City border on the left. All of these different colors indicate different alternatives right now. So as you can see, it's a very complicated project, and there are a lot of assets at risk. The orange dashed line show 12 miles of state road that is to be protected by the project. So the state has great interest, and Caltrans right now is actually applying to the federal government to receive money to be also a funder of this project, and we're really excited about Caltrans's interest. In addition, there's a lot of private sector assets. The city of East Palo Alto is developing the area, the purple circle that's off to the right. Facebook is developing the area in the middle. There are other private developers that are developing these other areas. So there's a lot of new development going into the area that is most at risk. And so that's why the cities are encouraging us to move forward on this project. Also, as I said, the Facebook campus is in the middle of the picture, and the PG&E substation is on the right. So there are a lot of assets in terms of protection. There are also a lot of assets in terms of potential marsh enhancement. And the blue arrows show areas that this project would enable to become tidal marsh that currently isn't tidal marsh. It's either in the salt pond restoration project, but currently salt ponds and not marshes, or it's other areas that are part of the salt pond project that are managed ponds that could be open to full tidal action. So here's the update on what we've done. We've developed and refined the feasible alternatives. We've engaged the key stakeholders. Some of them I mentioned, others I haven't yet. SFPUC, MidPen, the public. We collected available data, and we're getting right-of-way access for more data. We're completing the feasibility analysis anticipated for January, so about 7 months from now, and then we'll begin design and EIR, and that we think is about a 2-year process. And construction and permits are unknown. But we're actually going to start into design, engineering design, early next year. And so hopefully all of you, or some of you that are interested in this kind of project, can follow what we're doing, and we'll certainly make that information available. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As Peter is putting up the slideshow here, I take a moment and just say how the study started. At the tail end of the work that we were doing for SFO, it became quite obvious that even after the expenditure of the $100 or $200 million that would be needed to shore up San Francisco's levee system, it still would not completely be free of flooding because of potential flooding from sources other than the bay, primarily San Bruno and Colma Creek up in the north and Millbrae Creek to the south. So this was, again, thank you, Coastal Conservancy. They've really been championing a lot of the regional climate adaptation studies. Study partners here were, we worked with SFO and with the cities of San Bruno and Colma and South San Francisco, and Supervisor Pine's office primarily, and our team there. Primarily, our scope was to look at the existing work and projects that were done by the local partners here with separate intents of individual neighborhood flood control projects. And so we sort of got all those data together and started using it and leveraging it countywide. You know, what can we do? What does the data show? Are these projects using the same basis of designs and design criteria for flood protection? We collected all those data, supplemented it with some surveying, did some hydraulic modeling to identify the reaches which are deficient from a flooding standpoint, and then to actually look at some adaptation measures for present-day flooding as well as future with sea level rise itself. And this is primarily the figure that I thought I'd show and just to spend a few minutes on. Again, this is a data set that is freely available to everyone. It's a LiDAR data set, topography, which is flown by the USGS, satellite imagery, very high resolution, 1 meter accuracy. There's a lot of good that the satellites do also. But what this shows is the elevations of the lower portions of both San Bruno and Colma Creek, as well as SFO. And the color scheme that is shown up there is that everything is blue, is in the tidal zone. And you can see SFO there and how critical it is for the perimeter system to function, because without that, the entire airport system, including the terminal buildings, the runways, would be flooded. And then the importance of 101. Supervisor Horsley talked about 101 is very similar. It is the berm that is protecting all the neighborhoods to the west of 101 there. The slightly orange colors there are the 100-year king tide, which is the annual high tides that we get in San Francisco. All of these areas which were, I would say, developed post-gold rush were built at that time to what we knew what the 100-year levels were of the water itself, or the annual levels itself. Unfortunately, that's not good enough anymore, because with the sea levels that have already risen about 4 inches since these communities were built, they're already now deficient. So anything that is orange is in the present-day 100-year zone. Even with a single 1 foot of sea level rise, those areas start flooding. Caltrans is a very important study partner, or would have to be a study partner for this entire region right here, because of the importance of both 1 on the coast and 101 here in San Mateo. It was, again, I'll just quickly go through these, but there was a lot of work. What we determined was that there was quite a bit of work that was being done at the county itself in their local flood control projects, culvert projects, bridges. Getting all of that together in a single database was a great resource that I think would be used in the next phases of the study. Our primary focus with the analysis was to look at, in the past, most flood control projects looked at, depending on if it was a which is a stream flow, if it's watershed flow coming down a creek, levees were built to about 100-year level of protection. Down in the lower portions, they were built to the 100-year tide. But there's this gray zone between the two, which really is the problem areas. And a lot of the areas in the lower Colma Creek see this combined event happening when you have a really high December tide with a surge when the Pineapple Express hits us, and you have a good amount of rainfall. All those numbers go out the window because it's higher than the 100-year that we all designed for. And so at that point, the planners had said, well, it's good enough for now, let the next generation deal with it. Well, we are the next generation. And then the vulnerable reaches that were identified, again, it was very evident there that upstream of 101, it was all fluvially driven. When you have the watershed discharging down into the creek, those flood wall elevations were primarily driven by rains. Downstream of Utah Avenue, it was all tides. It was between 101 and Utah where it transitions from one to the other, and it was the combined event of these are now, there's more and more frequent flooding that happens at the Costco and the shopping malls down there. And then one arm of the Colma Creek, which a little innocuous slough that goes in, but it's an extremely important one because that becomes the pathway of flooding for the city of San Bruno and the other neighborhoods in the area. And so this is a great setting where the city of San Bruno, for example, doesn't have any levees or any tide gates or anything like that, but they're completely being affected by flooding that is happening in the city of South San Francisco, Millbrae, and the airport. City of San Bruno, again, the entire Bel Air neighborhood would be vulnerable. The tide gate structure, which was built there at the time to prevent flooding of 101, now is turning out to be a very critical asset, and that needs to go through the certification process with FEMA, and that would benefit both San Bruno as well as the other communities downstream. And then the long-term parking lot of SFO. If the tide gate is not maintained, the long-term parking lot floods too. So that's what I had.
Hello, I'm Jill Ekus, and I am recently brought on to the City of Half Moon Bay. I have an interesting senior management analyst title. I'm really a land use planner, and I specialize in community engagement. They've brought me on to support their staff on that staff side with the in-depth work that needs to be done with their general plan update. So I'm here today to just give you a couple points about what we're undertaking right now in Half Moon Bay. In contrast to the three speakers that you heard just now, we're just starting with looking at our sea level rise vulnerability assessment, and we are happy recipients of a grant being administered by OPC. This landed on my desk yesterday. This is the actual executed document. So I want to be clear, we're really at square one with respect to the technical work. So I got no maps and other things, but we'd love to come back in a few months when we do have product. That said, I'd love to spend just a moment or two sharing a little bit of context on how this is going to work for Half Moon Bay. So Half Moon Bay started a general plan local coastal program update about 1.5 years ago, and they made a big commitment to doing this by bringing in a consultant who is going to take it cradle to grave all the way through zoning and the EIR. So it's all been put on the books to get this done. And the Half Moon Bay's plan dates back to the early 90s, so it's been a while. They have already finished their housing element, so it's being done bit by bit. And that's part of the challenge as well as the benefit of having a look at sea level rise come into a comprehensive planning effort. We've had a recent situation where the overall general plan strategy needed to be refocused because there was a very traditional effort to look at different land use alternatives, and the community did not like them. And so it took some time to rejigger the process. City Council very wisely identified 4 key planning areas, and they are very traditional land use focused mostly on downtown, transportation, conservation and open space, which is near and dear to our Half Moon Bay residents, and then finally a very broad topic, but it hits right on with what we're talking about today, which is climate action plan and healthy community. And not only did they identify these topics that resonated with their public, as they said, staff, go out and meet at a very grassroots level with our neighbors. Go out there. So we've been doing, I share this with you because it's the funnest, most beneficial public outreach endeavor I've ever done. Basically pop-up block parties, and we've been through 5 neighborhoods so far. 2 of them are coastside neighborhoods. Every one of the neighborhoods gives us input about sea level rise, their worry about about bluff erosion, resources that are along the coast. The public gets it. They understand, and they want it looked at, and they want it done in a comprehensive way. So that's really very helpful for the planners. I've worked on other projects where there's coastside, and there were naysayers still questioning why we were even considering this. So that was very, very helpful. We are now with executing this agreement, we're going to have work product ready at a July 30th workshop. We're running a series of workshops over the summer on these 4 topics. And the July 30th one will include that climate action plan and healthy community topic. We'd love for you to come. Anyone who's interested in the coastside efforts, we have our fact sheet, a fabulous website, and just a couple things I'd like to leave you with in terms of how in depth the public is interested in this is I've met with 4th and 5th graders, met with 8th graders and high schoolers, and they all want to know what the city's going to do about this. Last night in a Pilarcitos neighborhood where we have a really nice Latino population, our translators struggled because we were trying to come up with all the right words for worrying about erosion and how to describe wave action and et cetera, and we were beginning to get shared language about that with our Spanish speakers, and they wanted to know about it. So it's been across the board so far. We've got 8 more pop-up block parties. If you live in Half Moon Bay, that would be great. We'll see you there. And thanks for having me. We are happy to come back to whatever the next step is with this group when we have some work product. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Joe and Len and Dilip and Jill. I hope the audience has a sense that for how much is happening in the county on this issue. There's a lot underway and a lot that we can build from as we go into this vulnerability assessment. So let's move to that topic and the main element of our meeting this morning. So I would like to introduce Peter Wiseman, who's going to provide an overview of the goals of the vulnerability assessment and the process for completing the study. So Peter is a program manager with Arcadis. He's worked in both Europe and the United States, focusing on the effects of climate change. Currently, he is responsible for developing Arcadis' water practice in Northern California. He has extensive experience in flood management, urban water management, climate change, and ecosystem restoration. He's worked in a lot of the trouble spots around the country, including New Orleans and New York. And most importantly, he hails from the Netherlands. And those guys know a lot about water and a lot about holding back the sea. So with that, let me introduce and welcome Peter Wiseman.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. What Dave didn't share is that I grew up 12 feet below sea level, so there's some hope for San Mateo County relative to sea level rise. I would like to introduce my fellow team members also. Jerry Slattery, he's the project manager for this team. Henry Pontarelli, he's the stakeholder engagement lead, and Grace Klein, who's the communications lead for the project. And we want to thank the county and the Conservancy for providing us the opportunity to work with them. And of course, we look forward to working with you all to tap into the knowledge that you have about the shoreline, about the community, and about the assets in the county. So the objective of this shoreline risk and vulnerability assessment is to develop a methodology and apply that methodology to really understand what are the key vulnerabilities within the county, what are the consequences of potential flooding, and how are we going to act on those. And if we break this down at what we're trying to accomplish in this study, first of all, as you just heard from the previous speakers, there's a tremendous amount of activity already going on in the county, which will be very valuable input. And there are a lot of best practices around the Bay Area that we'll be pulling into this study. We will be identifying and categorizing assets in the county that are potentially vulnerable. We will develop new inundation maps that will provide an overview of really which areas are vulnerable to sea level rise under different sea level rise scenarios, and then conduct a comprehensive vulnerability and risk assessment for a select number of assets in the county. And while the focus is on the risk and vulnerability assessment, we'll round up the study with a small exercise on adaptation planning to develop a vision for what a future with sea level rise could look like. Ultimately, to come up with work products that are helpful to you as stakeholders within the county, that you can take back to your constituents and better understand the challenges that you're faced with. I will go deeper into the scope later on in my presentation, but first, a little bit more background about flood risk and sea level rise. And as Dave pointed out earlier, and as some of the project examples showed, the county is already vulnerable to flooding today. And this is an example of flooding in Redwood City just last December. And if we look at sea level rise into the future, it's often said that, say, the 2100 high tide is equal to what is currently a 100-year storm. And as we look at rising sea levels, the likelihood of, or the probability of reaching certain higher water levels will increase, meaning that the risk of flooding will go up, as well as that the county continues to develop. It prospers, the economy grows, new assets are being built, so also the impacts or the consequences of flooding will increase if we don't adapt the shoreline to the impacts of sea level rise. So if you think about risk, what is acceptable and what is risk that you would tolerate? This is a picture of Bay Park wastewater treatment plant in Long Island, New York. It was inundated during Superstorm Sandy with 2 feet of water. It completely shut down the plant. All the electrical controls and the pump station didn't work, so the plant spilled raw sewage into the estuary for a full month. Now, likely, if this were to happen in San Francisco Bay, this would be considered an unacceptable risk. If we look at, go back to the county, this is a recent example of flooding at Linda Mar Beach, and having a discussion about what is tolerable and intolerable. Well, this is a great nuisance when Highway 1 floods, when a road floods, once the water recedes because the storm dies down or it's low tide, a road is typically back in action. So thinking about different types of assets and how they respond to flooding is a key aspect of this study, and that's what we will be exploring as part of the vulnerability and risk assessment. Ultimately, in terms of adaptation planning, how well do different options to reduce risk apply to the San Mateo County shoreline? What are the trade-offs in terms of time and money, ultimately to protect the lives of people and to protect the natural and built environment? As I said earlier, we'll be heavily using best practices and learn from others in the county and around the Bay. Some great work has been done by the Pacific Institute, by the Army Corps and DWR on the impacts of sea level rise, and including, say, the economic impacts to the county. The research that has been done by the Research Council